Quiet, numbskull. I'm broadcasting.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our second episode of The Cycle of Mayhem. So today we have our commentator of Common Sense, AJ HAZE. And he's going to break it down. Hopefully the storm going outside his house and my house doesn't cut our show prematurely short. So we have a bang-up show. Today is going to be a show on Afghanistan. Did bloody Biden, want a 9/11 Memorial Day celebration?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, first, Jim, I think we got to thank Jim, Mother Nature, for hanging in there with us. Still got lights on, still got power. So I think maybe Mother Nature and the good Lord up above must be sending us a signal. This show must go on. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Ballistic Patriots' Cycle of Mayhem in Plain Sight. And for those of you who were tuning in for the first time, or those of you who tuned in to our first show, our mission here with the Cycle of Mayhem is to give you the lowdown on what our elected officials are up to, and what is in plain sight right there for you to see. And if you don't see it, our job here is, and our objective is, to point you in the right direction, other than relying on, let's say, questionable news, to give you information where you can see it for yourself and realize, sometimes you don't really need the news to sway you one way or the other, because the truth and some pretty good facts are right there in front of you. So as Jim said, tonight's show is we're gonna start off with Afghanistan, but a little different part of Afghanistan. Obviously, it sounds cliche, but our hearts are bleeding for those people and our troops and all the tragedy that the fallout from that disaster. But we're going to take it to a part what led up to that and what created it. And as Jim said in the open, did this originally start? And again, we'll tap your common sense here. Did Jim did Biden, was he looking for his 9/11 celebration this year? Was he looking for the big moment to go out there on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and say, look what I've done? No president has done this. No one has done this. I pulled our troops out of Afghanistan, and it seemed to have gone terribly wrong, it appears. So let's break that down. Starting with, was that his intention? Seems pretty logical. There was some type of reasoning behind why all of a sudden pull the troops. Why all of a sudden are we, just without any planning, without any military input, paying attention to what the generals, the intelligence were saying, why all of a sudden abruptly do that and cause this mess? And I want to tap your mind for a little bit to think, is there any explanation? It seems like from the Boy Scouts all the way up, the common person has an idea that was wrong, kind of knows it was wrong. So it seems here, folks, we want to point out, when things went bad in Afghanistan, and he wasn't going to budge on that August 31st date, regardless. He wasn't moving. And you can even see from his cabinet members and stuff like that, when they were doing their interviews, they seemed a little tongue-tied. They seemed a little bit like deer in the headlights when asked very simple questions to why. So go back to what we started. Was he looking for that 9/11 celebration to prove he's legitimate? His numbers are in the tank. His numbers, it started to leak out and it's becoming more and more common now that people are questioning, is this person able to run the ship? And are we safe? And, who's controlling things with our country? So if you look at it this way, and this is where we want you to follow along here, he blunders the Afghanistan exit, if we would say, with hopes that it would have been a celebratory event for him. Big political points, basically. And when it didn't go the way he thought, he needed to get things and get that done and over with. The significance of August 31st, there's no other rhyme or reason but one to conclude the sooner we can get out of there now, the sooner this will, really be ugly in the headlines. People are not going to be happy on both sides of the aisle, and hopefully they'll get distracted and fizzled out. And I would say shortly after, our troops were killed and things were going way, way south in Afghanistan, I would think that there might have been some politicians out there doing jumping jacks and a rain dance for a hurricane, something to change the headlines. And if you saw, and I'm sure most of you did, it went from a lot of the coverage in Afghanistan, which should have maintained the headlines, to everything about the hurricane. And to those people in Louisiana and anyone that suffered from that hurricane, it's tragic. It seems like those people can't get a break. Unfortunately, some people try to tap that as a political diversion. And they rode that hurricane and they kept putting it on the front pages. And in fact, just before the hurricane, the timing, there was actually a news blip that went out, was the source of the COVID virus was put out. And there was some short headlines on all the major news outlets that led you to believe that there was going to be a release of where COVID, hey, we found the source of COVID. And that, it didn't last long. So then they tapped into the hurricane and they dragged that out as long as they can. And, the hurricane left a devastating path and a lot of damage, but it moved on and it's kind of on its way out now. So what was the next step? In a couple of states, a lot of local governors all of a sudden, just out of the blue, who actually were on the record of saying, we will not mandate schools wear masks. We're going to leave it to each individual district to make that decision. Surprisingly, the other day, out of nowhere, governors start popping off at the mouth. We're going to mandate masks again. And what did it do? It took over the airways again and put Afghanistan, 15, 20 minutes back into the news. Keep it off the headlines. And again, you guys can turn around and connect the dots on that. You probably, some of you who follow along a little more frequently, are going, son of a gun, and keep an eye on it, folks, because what again was the motive, the urgency. Well, I'll tell you what the urgency is. It's not November 2nd as election day anymore. Those ballots start getting mailed out in 3 weeks. And right now, the numbers are ugly for the Democrats. Their leader, their face of the Democrats, is the president. Let's face it, it's how it works. And they don't want that in the headlines, this Afghanistan thing and lots of other things. So they're looking for diversions. Again, it's not like our historic elections where they have months to make this go away. They're down to weeks. So we raised question here on the Cycle of Mayhem that, why there's no answer to why he pulled out the way he did and the carnage that was left behind. And if you follow those events, ask yourself, does it make sense? Did it really, the way they unfold it? And, would the answer be yes, in your common sense, that they are looking for a diversion to keep that off the headlines? Right, Jim? Anything you want to add to that? I'm not getting any audio from you, Jim. So I'm going to continue with our next segment, which is, how did we get here? We talked about last show the frustration with our elected officials. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, people just aren't feeling good. They're not feeling good about the current situation, whether it be the economy, whether it be security at this point. How safe are we? There's a lot of things, and we touched on.
Sorry about that, Jim.
No worries, got your back, buddy. Loud and clear.
Definitely technical issues going on here at the Northern Command, as my brother and I say.
Yeah.
So you were saying, I apologize. that there definitely does seem to be some connections here, right?
It's pretty obvious because, like it's articulated, pretty much the boy, even the Boy Scouts could, and on up, and anybody in between would read this and say, "What are you doing?" If the allegation was that President Trump set some something deadline to pull the troops out, whatever type of diversion that was, and the watchers here, if you're Republican or Democrat, you can have your view whether Trump had an impact on this or not. But what makes more sense?
Right.
Why not kind of ride it out a little bit more? You sent 6,000 plus troops over there. They're there. You let them as sitting ducks, but it is. Jim,
There's still a whole bunch of people there too. I mean, it's not like he got everyone out like he claims, and he said clearly to George Stephanopoulos that he was going to keep the troops there until he got every American out, which he didn't. I mean, the last I heard, there was a family from Texas that couldn't get out, and they were struggling. And so I'm wondering, we have Bloody Hands Biden, who left, by the way, $93 billion worth of military equipment. Now, I understand that we were trying to help our allies out, but when you saw things starting to go south and you saw that they were abandoning their equipment, don't you think that you would have made it a higher priority to start blowing up those stockpiles? Or, I mean, if you're not going to send in more troops, right? I get it. He wants to end the war. He wants them out. He wants it for all the good reasons to keep our people there. There were good reasons, the intel on the ground. There was a whole bunch of reasons. But there's no excuse to leave $93 billion worth of equipment in the hands of a group of people who are our avowed enemies, and that can also sell that material in the black market to more of our enemies and give that technology to our enemies so that they can listen. Theoretically, they know how to shoot down a Black Hawk, or they know how to shoot down the drones. But when they can get their hands on it, when the Chinese can get their hands on it, reverse engineer it, and then make 20 of them and practice shooting them down so that they know the best way to take down our drones, that's what you call bad way of doing business. And that's exactly what this clown did.
Well, Jim, the question goes back to, and what you just highlighted was what everybody has been seeing: the amount of equipment, the people left behind, Americans and those Afghans who helped us. I mean, they were the highlights, and what we were trying to show, because that's what kind of makes the cycle of mayhem here on Ballistic Patriot a little different. Is it's the part that you're not seeing on the TVs. And you're not seeing on the internet, or maybe some people don't tap into it, but, was why that August 31st deadline? Why was he so adamant about that? Again, what was the motive to even consider to move this along from like July?
Vanity.
It was a CYA move, it appears. His numbers are horrible. I mean, you could only, and we're going to get into that in the second half of this show, how we got here. But you can only, keep someone in the basement locked up and put the smoke and mirrors up for so long. And like we said in the last show, when you start to hit people in their pocket with inflation and the taxes, whether it be gas taxes, the gas prices, your real estate taxes, and everything's just going on a whack, then people start to ask a lot of questions, people who normally don't pay attention to this stuff. And that's where they saw his ratings tanking. And when his ratings tank, the party tanks, and it's not good. And again, I don't want to get ahead because we're going to get into the second part of that, but it seems, and I asked people the question, what was the motive? It looked like he was looking to hoist that trophy up, try to make himself legitimate. Look, I'm here, I'm alive, there's no strings hooked to my arms, and and have that moment to be able to say on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, that indeed he was the one who finally, after all these people, got our troops out. And again, it didn't turn out the way they planned. They planned it, or it didn't turn out good. And now it's using different things, whether it's a hurricane, um, mass mandates, or whatever it is they could possibly do to keep it out of the headlines and keep it on the back pages. So now let's take a look at how did we get here? And meaning, all the events going back and even prior to the 2016 election. And for some of you, you'll remember this far back. And some of you, as I start to go on, you'll start to catch on. But I want to bring some things. And again, these things happen. They happen right in front of your eyes. And it's just important to remind people. The ultimate thing here is to make sure everyone makes an educated guess before they vote, regardless of party. Make an educated vote. Really think things through and do the best you can. So let's jump into this. How did we get here? We're going to go back in time when the country wasn't doing too good. People were frustrated, just like they are today. Maybe quite not as frustrated, but they were feeling that the same old cycle of mayhem wasn't working. And a gentleman decided to run for president by the name of Ross Perot. Ross Perot was well funded. He had money. And I would believe that up until that point, he was an independent. I forget if he ran independent, but he ran as a third party who probably put up the biggest fight in our time that actually had a shot. And people were gravitating to him and really digging what this guy was saying. And it was more the vibe that no more the same old. No more of the cycle of mayhem with the same old two-party, maintain power at all costs and screw the little guy. And it didn't pan out because it's real difficult to run as an independent or a third party. It's virtually impossible. It's been pulled off a couple times, but it's just the amount of votes you need and the electoral college and everything. It just doesn't work out. So there was really no big movement for years and years and years since Ross Perot. And then things may have gotten a little better over time. And then things started to go south. People were feeling it. The working class was really feeling it. And we'll take you back to the 2000, I believe it was 13 or 2012 primary, Republican primary. And the candidates were on the stage. And they were asking questions, and they were given the same old, what is your name? Well, it's raining outside. What car did you drive? Well, the water's really warm. And it was a classic political career politician diversion. So the Republicans had their elites up there on the stage, and they really weren't impressing anybody. It was more like low energy. And all of a sudden, somebody they asked him a question, and he gave an answer. What are you going to do on taxes? Boom, a definitive answer. You might not agree with it, although it was a pretty good answer. Made sense. What are you going to do with national security? What are you going to do with this? He answered every question in detail, and he started moving closer to the center of the stage. And very early on, I saw the first primary debate, and I picked up on it right away. I said, there's something special about this man. He's going to be president. He is going to be a president. And people ridiculed me for it. They said, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. And until maybe a month later, he became the number one, and that was Herman Cain. May he rest in peace. So I ask you to think back about Herman Cain. Yes, the pizza salesman. He was a executive with a pizza company, CEO, but he was a businessman. He was brought fresh ideas to the table. And he began to climb. The unthinkable was happening. And all of a sudden, people started talking about him. And that's where the ugly politics shows its head. Why dump money into a candidate that doesn't have a chance? But when he became number one in the Republican primary, a contender for the president of the United States, that's when the money starts getting dumped into the opposition research and things like that. And they started digging into him. And he had some marital affairs or something along that lines. And he was shamed. He was shamed, and he dropped out. So, but let's think about this for a second. There was a message there. There was something going on in our country that Herman Cain, nobody ever heard of this man. all of a sudden became the #1 contender for the Republican primary for president of the United States. He was shamed and he dropped out, but something was there and it didn't go away. So we fast forward time, but the country was starting to show we're ready for change. We're ready. And I would ask you, would it be fair to say that kind of the groundwork was starting to be laid for an outside candidate, somebody totally different than a career politician? And I'm going to ask you this question. Do you believe that President Trump made his decision to run on that famous video of him and Melania coming down the escalator? Do you really think that that's when he made that decision?
No, he definitely made the decision long before that.
Let's face it, President Trump is a very, very tough man, and he's an aggressive guy when it comes to what he wants and what he wants to accomplish. Some people might not like it, but that being said, there was a moment that I believe, and I think others, when you see this, and it'll remind you that this was when he actually decided, I'm coming for your job and I'm going to run for president of the United States. Jim, when you're ready?
Yep, let's
take a look at this, folks.
Roll that tape.
Donald Trump is here tonight. Now, I know that he's taken some flack lately, but no one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing? What really happened in Roswell? And where are Biggie and Tupac? Say what you will about Mr. Trump. He certainly would bring some change to the White House. All kidding aside, obviously we all know about your credentials and breadth of experience. For example, no, seriously, just recently in an episode of Celebrity Apprentice, at the steakhouse, the men's cooking team did not impress the judges from Omaha Steaks. And there was a lot of blame to go around, but you, Mr. Trump, recognized that the real problem was a lack of leadership. And so ultimately you didn't blame Little John or Meatloaf. You fired Gary Busey. And these are the kind of decisions that would keep me up at night.
So I have to can I just say something? Like,
sure.
The depth and experience of, first of all, I apologize for all the internet issues tonight. There is Hurricane Ida that just flew over us, is still flying over us, what's left of her. That's my only excuse. Let me just say something about that clip. The depth and experience and breadth of his experience, Donald Trump's experience. He did more before he was 33. By the time he was 33, on I think it was his first or second interview, he did more in that time period than Obama did in his entire life to this date, twice as long. Twice as long. So I mean, that it is such a rank level of garbage for him to be mouthing off about that. Absolutely, Trump did more in that one day of that, the day that aired. Trump did more in that one day than that clown did for 8 years as president.
Well, again, that's what makes the cycle of mayhem here on Ballistic Patriot. Some people may have saw that video before, or
I've seen it.
Or you saw it, and then all of a sudden you see it again. You go, "Son of a bitch!" I remember that. But you watched
angers
the
me. I'm
for
not
people,
him.
Well,
Takes me off.
For the people who don't know what that was, traditionally they have a White House Correspondents' Dinner. They invite a lot of people from the press and VIPs and stuff like that. And the president goes around and he roasts them. He jokes and he takes a turn here, a turn there, and a turn here. Well, it was clear that Obama went directly at him. He threw a couple jokes and just kept pounding. President Trump kept pounding him and pounding.
Trump
and
can't
you could
respond
see
to that. Yeah, he can't.
Well, you could see his expression. He was laughing. He had a sense of humor, And then he started to see that this was personal, and you saw that look, and like most people would look. And I would say, folks, was it the escalator ride down that he decided he was going to run for president, or was it that moment right there? And I think the answer is pretty clear, And as we move on, again, we're going back, how did we get here? So we talked about Ross Perot running as an independent, had some leverage, was moving along. It didn't quite work out. Herman Cain shoots to the top, another outsider, and some dirty laundry comes out about him. And then this happens. So does that trigger it? I would have to say that moment that you just saw on the tape was when he looked and said, "I'm coming for your job, and I'm not going to be nice about it." And so as we move on, President Trump decides to run. He puts his name in the hat, and we all know what happened in that primary. He just kept telling him, "You're going to start falling off the stage one at a time," and he's running his campaign, and they're starting to fall off like dominoes. And then all of a sudden, President Obama starts getting a little irritated now, and he's got to throw some more jabs at him. Jim, whenever you're ready, you can roll that.
President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. Well, at real Donald Trump, at least I will go down as a president.
Now, folks, as you can see, we're showing you here, there's a little timeline going on. This is during the campaign, and President Obama surfaces, and he goes on national TV, and, based on the outcome, he looked like a fool. He was made a fool of. And regardless of your party, Democrats, you're tuned in, it is what it is. And believe me, we have our fair share, and we'll get into that in a second, of Republicans who aren't too bright. But we're following along here. We're trying to bring up the stuff on how we got to where we're at. And, there was also a point in time where everybody loved Donald Trump. It was probably one of the biggest hypocrisies in our country's ever seen. And you can't erase it because, again, it's in plain sight. And, everybody wanted to flock to him. They wanted selfies with him. Jim, can we give some examples of that?
There you go. Oh, wait, there we go. And
I mean, these are some of the most radical Democrats that ever walked the face of the earth. And they just couldn't wait to get a piece of that casino and be seen with the, in those days it wasn't really a selfie, but they wanted to get in that picture. They were flocking to him. They were flocking to Donald Trump like he was a king. They probably ate his steak too, and wined and dined on his dime. You go through the list. I mean, there's a heck of a lot more, but I think you get the idea here. Well, we're going to get to that in a second. And then, if that wasn't enough, he was actually asked by somebody who clearly showed no love for him when he finally decided to run. He was asked by one of these people now who is for the opposition, totally wanting to lambast him. Jim, roll it.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No,
Listen to the applause, by the way.
By the way, it didn't pay him at all because he put all his money when he did become president. He gave it away.
Yeah. So watch the people's faces in the background.
I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
What do you think of this year's presidential race, the way it's shaping up?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I think that probably George Bush has an advantage. in terms of the election. I think that probably people would say that he's got like that little edge in terms of the incumbency, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Jesse Jackson's done himself very proud. I think Michael Dukakis has done one hell of a job. And George Bush has done a hell of a job. You know, they all went in there sort of as semi-underdogs, including George Bush, and they've all come out. I think people that are around all three of those candidates can be very proud of the jobs they've done.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone into.
Did you want me to go back to when he first announced it to get their first impressions? Did you want to see that?
You could, but yeah, because that's important. That's the voters. I mean, you know, obviously Oprah's one of the biggest stars in the world, and but it's the people behind them in the audience that's important. It's a very diverse group of people, and they're almost with their expressions saying, "I hope this guy runs."
The way it's shaping up.
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I think
Back here.
they're making it's a joke.
This sounds like political.
I think actually too the part where you didn't hear was he is going after the countries. By the way, the same message he would put out in 2016. That says,
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm tired of our country, you know, not having fair trade with countries like Japan, where they go out. In fact, I'll just let them play. I'll let him say it.
And yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me.
Yeah, I think you're raising some good points there, AJ.
That was the point. No, I think we could articulate it here, and folks, you could pull this video up if you want to watch it in its entirety. But you know, it's there's people in the back, and that's shortly after, if I'm not mistaken, Jim. It was right after the Ross Perot, or right around that time frame where, you know, the Americans were fed up and they were frustrated and they were looking for some fresh and new. And like you touched on, you know, what he's saying back then, think of all the years that went by before he finally ran on. If there's anything to blame him for, you know, that's one big thing. You waited too long. We got ripped off billions and billions of dollars over all those years, you know, that we could have got our fair share, as he would say.
Well,
folks,
we all got you know, our eyes blinded by the Bushies, and this was in '88. This was in '88, so it's 4 years before Ross Perot. But it's certainly this is the time period where that delusion of what the hell is going on with my country, I'm a little fed up with it.
Mm-hmm.
That the Ross Perot pushback is on the move at this point.
And you know, I think if you fast forward time from those events, from you know, the Oprah interview to, you know, everybody wanting to get a selfie with him, and again, these are powerful Democrats in those pictures. You know, it wasn't just like all Hollywood stars. These are political you know, advocates, political operatives, and they all just wouldn't want to get a piece of the pie. And to just turn on somebody like that, and you know, when he decided to run, I think it's fair to say, you know, he knew Ross Perot couldn't win as independent. But if you listen to what he says in the Oprah interview, he gives Dukakis, which was kind of rough, to give him props. He gives Bush props. He basically was like apolitical there, you know. But he knew I shouldn't say he knew. Is it fair to say that he knew later on when he decided to run that he'd have to pick a side? He'd have to pick one of the two major parties to get in the seat, because all his ideas he couldn't implement all his ideas and these policies to start making America first unless he was in the throne, in the chair.
Well, I also think what you see in that, you know, it's not just that he's not trying to pick a side. It's also more about, you know, we hear constantly how much a terrible man he is, but you know, this is clearly speaking to the lie that is, because he's not wrecking on Jesse Jackson's campaign. He's not talking about Michael Dukakis in this stupid helmet and riding that tank. He's not going after the campaigns of Bush or not doing any of those things. He's simply being a nice guy and says, hey, these campaigns, the people around them, they got nothing to, they should hang their head high because they should stand, they've done a good job. That to me is the sign of a good guy, not some jerk that they want to malign him, which is, of course, getting to your point, I believe.
It's
About
almost
how,
like he was. It's almost like, Jim, he was throwing a signal to those candidates that, hey, whether it's Bush, whether it's Dukakis, hey, you're all good guys, but listen to what I'm telling you here. If you get into office, you need to tighten the belt and start getting our fair share. We can't let everybody bring their stuff here for free, take all
right.
our jobs, and we all know how that turned out,
It's
for the
not
American
fair
worker.
trade. It's not fair trade when we can't get trade done in their country.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
they
we
can
could
come here and
spend.
sell whatever they want.
Yep, we could spend hours talking about that. But
Yeah, we
so
could.
let's follow that timeline that we just did here, and we still got a little bit more to go on it. There's the Oprah interview, and you saw for your own eyes again in plain sight what was going on and what was building to why we are where we're at today. And then there was a point in time not too long ago that President Obama was in an interview, and he kind of said it joking. I actually think he was kind of joking around with it at the time. That if I could, have an earpiece in and just kind of bark orders from behind the curtain, that would be kind of cool. He pretty much draws something out there, that if he could run for a third term, this is what he'd like to do. And do we have a clip of that, Jim? Or
No, give me a minute. I'll keep talking. I'll get it.
Yeah, but those of you who recall it, trust me, it happened, and it's there, just like everything else we showed you. And so hold that thought for a second, where he says that. Now all of a sudden, President Trump is running, and his numbers are starting to decline. And one thing I want to just chime in for a second. This is not, a whole pro-Trump thing or vote for this person. This is what happened, okay? And this is why we're getting to why we are where we are today. And you can make your own decision on that, what makes sense, and who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, because there's good guys and bad guys on both sides of that aisle. Still too many. But so then we come into the election, and you have all the Democrats in their primaries, and you look at Bernie Sanders, a self-admitted socialist. I always got to give the guy props because he doesn't waver. I mean, some of the things that come out of his mouth, even the people who want all the free stuff are going, well, at least if he gives us half of it, it's good, because they didn't even believe. But he stands by his guns, and it sounded like, after the last primary, when his party kind of stiffed him and stymied him for a real swamp, she was a real prize. That basically there was better candidates up there on that stage in that Democratic primary. I wouldn't say any of them was really spectacular, but it was pretty clear. Bernie had a following, he had a loyal support group, but in the end of the day, it was the party. The party's controlling it. Who would give us the best odds of winning? What would be the combination? And I would say, folks, it's fair to say, I think, that they looked at that and realized we needed this, and these two will give it this higher side. How could you put somebody in as a vice president who was ready to drop out? I think the rating, Jim, what were the ratings? Like 0? Maybe 2? The lowest rated candidate on the stage.
Talking about Biden, right?
It is what it is, folks. We don't make this up. This is real. This is what happened. But they were looking at what team can we put on the field so we can maintain our power. But the question is, does that, we go back to President Obama, who was, okay, he got his jabs in at President Trump at the Correspondents' Dinner. And then I don't know if it's to say President Trump got his jabs in on President Obama, but President Obama really made an idiot out of himself on national TV that Donald Trump would never win. In the meantime, does that show the disconnect? How career politicians don't know what's going on the front lines, what's going on at the dinner table, what's going on in the home? Could be, maybe not. But you have to ask yourself, there's something was going on as we're showing you this timeline. And as we move forward, that was the ticket there, was to put two people out there who we give them the highest odds. And, there's Jim knows how I feel. I'm not going to waste this show, and I wouldn't call it a waste, but it's enough talk going on out there about, was there voter fraud? Was there this? Was there that? Maybe it'll come out someday. Maybe it won't. We all have our suspicions on things. But in the end of the day, President Trump lost one way or the other. And now we have what we have. And that's where we're at today. That's how we got there today. But, you have to think to yourself, folks, 300 million people in the United States of America. And if people didn't like Donald Trump, or they didn't like the other candidate who may have not been in their prime to run, 300 million people, where are we at where we can't find a real leader if that's the case when you get both sides involved? That's something to think about too. So one thing you also need to look at is when you look at the two-party system. About 8 years ago, the Conservative Party, the conservative movement, Republicans, started to clean house. They did. They started realizing that, and when I say the party, it was the people, the voters of the party. I think we could agree that the party might not have liked what was going on. But the voters overwhelmingly started doing some house cleaning. And they're still, to this day, doing housekeeping and house cleaning. I would say look ahead at Mitt Romney, Sass, Markowski, Liz Cheney. You're going to see, some real big heavy hitters coming at them to primary them. They want them out. The people want them out. And, it's a high probability. Again, we won't, on this show, we try to give you good information. We don't have that crystal ball as we talked about. But the Republicans did housekeeping. Over 8 years ago, they started cleaning house and getting rid of them. And they're replacing these, one thing people could agree upon is Republicans and Democrats is term limits. It's like the slam dunk almost that you should term limits, none of this career politician nonsense. But the conservatives started to clean their house. It's Romney, Sass. There's a few others that, like I said, the party, meaning the voters of the party, are going to be doing grassroots movement to primary them and sayonara or even to get them voted out. Yeah, it's already. That's why I said it started about 8 years ago. The question is, when is the Democrats, the voters of the Democrat Party, going to start doing their housekeeping and their house cleaning? Because
AJ, I think I'm just gonna throw in here, in my mind, their idea of house cleaning, their idea of cleaning things up, is to elect more AOCs. I've seen it here in my area, where they have a moderate Democrat in the 5th district here in New Jersey. They have a moderate Democrat in the 11th district of New Jersey. And what they're trying with the 5th district, last time around, they tried to bring in a complete left-wing AOC style Democrat who they were going to try to run and dominate the moderate. He's not really a moderate, to be truthfully. He's to the left. He really is to the left, despite his voting record. But I'll say this: their idea of putting it out there, like, in other words, the idea of making it so that the 5th or other districts are going to be cleaned up. Their idea is get rid of the people who are towards the center. As much as Gottheimer is, I think, to the left, and he is, they wanted somebody who was all the way over by AOC.
Mm-hmm.
So, Here you got your first prop
Well,
here, David Gibson. Thanks for the information, and he appreciates it.
thank you, David. Thanks for tuning in, man, and spread the word. And you know, when Jim asked, you know, for Ballistic Patriot and the shows that are on now, you know, to share, like, and spread the word, you know, we're I think we're way past our age, Jim, to be looking for to go viral to make a living out of it. That's not what we're doing here.
Yeah,
It's not. It's to cut through the nonsense to, you know, to really
It's to fight for our country.
Well, yeah, it's a different way to fight for our country, where you know, that's where it's important to like and share. And as we talked about last week, if you have some of the seniors or some folks that don't do internet, or maybe are stuck with certain news channels, have a conversation. Don't have an argument with them. Have a conversation with them, because if you could take some of the stuff we're saying here and have that discussion, I think instead of a 2-second argument where, oh, you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican, we don't like each other, and you know, a few one signal gestures go up, I think you could get some dialogue, and the important thing is for people to know. So getting back to what I was saying is, when are the Democrats going to start cleaning their house? You know, how long? And Jim made a point that they're still trying to push for some of these, off the wall candidates who really don't even bring anything to the table. Where they, you know, we talked last week about, you know, a nurse and a lot of blue collar people could really make some great leaders because they live the life, they know what's going on, and they can make really rational decisions. Not people who were silver spoon fed. But that being said, we find there's a lot of Democrats out there who support their troops, who believe in law and order, who salute their flag, and they are patriotic people.
Second
Amendment. You think only conservative people go hunting and stuff like that? But the bottom line is, they're not even getting close, like Jim said, to house cleaning, because they keep pushing for. And let me break it down in a simple way. And Jim, you touched on something. The play now to get into office, you know, it's in the Democrat playbook for sure, is, I'm going to run as a moderate. You know, if you remember, you know, President Biden ran as the unifier in chief, and he, you know, with little talking he did, he tried to come off as a moderate up the middle. You know, I'm the classic Joe, and and we know we see today it was false, and what you need to look at is some of these hard left, radicals that were brought in there. And the masses, you got to clean house, because it's clear that the large majority of the Democratic Party are patriotic people and do believe in those common sense issues. There could be there is those differences, you know, the classic differences between the parties. That's for another show. But think about this, folks, for a second. Please think about it. Do you think every Democrat wants to turn their back or kneel for the flag, or doesn't feel pain for those troops? You know the answer. It's simply just that's ridiculous. The problem is that they haven't. The voters need to start cleaning house, and they need to start speaking up, just like the Republicans did, and get these people out. They got to get their old dirty laundry out. There's 4 or 5 of them that have like 400 years in. Maybe 700 years in office. They got to get rid of that. They got to get rid of this and vote out this radical movement. They got to vote these people out. I mean, they have to, because, you know, you have right now, their party has been hijacked by this new movement that makes up under 20% of their party, probably around 15% of their party, but they got 100% influence and control on what's going on. Even if President Biden, had his wits and really meant to run as a moderate, it didn't last long because he was intimidated by the 15%. And, you know, it goes back to, gee, I wish I can have an earpiece in and just bark the orders from behind the curtain. Makes one wonder, because there's a lot of questions being asked right now. Who is running the country? And we'll leave that up to you to decide based on what we presented here. But they got to clean house. They can't have 15% of people, new faces coming in with these very dangerous radical ideas, and then you have the OGs who became multimillionaires and never really had a real job. I mean, if you're doing 50 years almost in elected office, when did you have a real job? When was there time to fit that in? Maybe a dishwasher when you were a kid a little bit, and then boom. So again, here on the Cycle of Mayhem, that how we got here and where we're at today is a big cycle of mayhem. It is absolutely mayhem that we're dealing with what we have to deal with. So the Republicans started cleaning house. They're still going to clean house aggressively. If we could get the Democratic Party to start cleaning house and put some moderate people out there where, they could butt heads over, and I'm not saying one way or the other, pro-life or pro-choice. They're very big issues to a lot of people, but there's a lot of other common ground, and they can't have 15% of the people speaking for them. And with the smoke and mirrors that's been going on, there's no light. We talked about that at the end of the tunnel right now. Every day it just seems like something else and something else. So, that's kind of an outline. If you missed something, go ahead back, replay the episode, and feel free, as always. We always welcome you to go out there and do your research to see, what we're putting out. And that's what you have to do sometimes, is connect the dots. And a lot of times the answer will be right in front of your face. And our ultimate goal, when I say the answer, is whether it's the local dog catcher election, the small local town school boards, commissioner races, critical this year, people. You have to get out and vote, but you have to look at who is their leaders, what are their leaders doing, because ultimately that message and that you will do as I say trickles down, and do your best to find that genuine person. And don't be fooled by the I'm going to run up the middle. Like Jim pointed out, some of these people have been in office for a few years, and their voter histories, I mean, it's right there at your fingertips now. You can kind of see how they vote. But I think it's a very, very fair thing to say the masses of the Democrat Party, those patriotic Democrats who, like I said, are torn and disgusted, not only financially with the inflation, but seeing those troops and those families, we could go on and on about it. They feel pain. They felt pain on 9/11. And, they need to start stepping up and start cleaning house and voting it out. And if you look at the way it will come together, you start getting rid of all the fat and the swamp, and you start getting, you might have real tough decisions pretty soon if we can get this moving. So that's why we're doing this, is to give you some info, guide you in the right direction, and get you out there to vote. Please pay attention to that the local races in your community. You're not going to see the big polarizing thing we saw in the last election, probably ever again. Maybe, we'll see. But it's important because that controls your local government, and they read off of that, and they see the patterns, and hopefully that will influence higher legislation for 2022 to get some better, competent legislators in there.
AJ, we're at 54 minutes.
Did I get it in?
I think we might be done for the night. I just want to remind everybody to like and subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook. Share this with your friends. Get people to follow us. Make sure you follow the website or the page, and we will be gladly putting out more shows. We'll be back next week at 8 o'clock for Cycle of Mayhem. And on Sunday night, my brother and I do a show called the Brotherhood of Liberty. You're welcome to join in and, have a dialogue with us. Send us some messages through the Facebook or wherever it may be. All right. Any questions from you, AJ? Anything, final parting thoughts?
Folks, thank you so much for watching. Again, we're not here to be, make millions of dollars on social media or anything like that. We both have busy lives, but we make sure we find the time to do this, to put it out there. So we hope you enjoyed it. We hope it was informative, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And be kind. It's tough, but be kind. Remember, the people you pass by in the grocery store, you might have little differences here and there, but try to be kind to one another. It's a lot of it's not their fault. It's the powers to be way, way above our pay grades. Okay, God bless.
God bless and take care.
Quiet, numbskull. I'm broadcasting.